to do it. So now when he came in with a wheelchair because he couldn't walk. Because when we talk about cancer, when people are diagnosed with cancer, one of the main things you notice, they lose a lot of muscle mass. They lose a lot of strength. Their inability to do their day-to-day movement. They find it difficult to walk. They undergo chemo treatment, radiation, hormonotherapy, surgery, and that causes a lot of weakness in their body. And that's what we call cancer cachexia, which is muscle wasting. So when that individual came in with a wheelchair, couldn't move, wasn't able to talk that much. But then when he started undergoing the rehab, when it comes to the holistic approach, the exercise, focusing on the neurocognition when it comes to memory, which was one of the main things I was doing. Because the reason why I was doing the neurocognition is because whenever those cancer patients go to their doctor, the doctor just gives them a lot of survey to fill out in order to assess their cognitive function, in order to assess their memory. But then some of these survey can be forced. Because if the patient is already tired, guess what they're going to do? They're just going to check everything out. So then I was able to nice and partner with a company, then we nice and get an equipment, so we can nice and assess that cognitive function. So then we can nice and see their number, then they undergo a specific 12-week session. Then after that 12-week session, then we do a post-assessment in order to see their progression. Guess what? That individual that was told he only got 1 month to live, he's still living right now. He's still working. And that's when we talk about the process of aging, understanding, which is the education aspect of those biological. When we talk about blood pressure, how many of you know your number when it comes to blood pressure? I only see a few hands. It's not constant, but you should know the parameter. You should know the parameter. And that's why when we talk about blood pressure is a symptomless disease. It shows no sign, shows no symptoms. You might be walking, you might feel normal, but you never know you have high blood pressure. But then if you don't check it, then you won't know that you have high blood pressure. And even if you are taking the high blood pressure medication, it's also very, very important for you to continually checking those blood pressures. Very, very important. And that's one of the main things I do, especially whenever I see those patients virtually. We take their blood pressure 3 times during that session. That's why it's very, very important. So those are just the biological components. We talk about the blood pressure. Then the other one is talking about diabetic. Very, very important to nice and know your number, especially when it comes to your blood A1C. Because if you don't know your number, then you won't understand ways for you to care for yourself and try to lower those numbers, especially if you are type 2 diabetic. Because when we talk about type 2 diabetic, I know there is a lot of medical individuals right here in our midst. Type 2 diabetic is not about low insulin production. It's not about that. Most of the people who are type 2 diabetic produce a lot of insulin. But it's all about the insulin sensitivity. That's why it's very, very important. I'll give you another example. We have an individual who has been taking those diabetic medication for 3 years, but never check their blood glucose, because those are different. Between your A1C, that's when you check that, whenever you get your blood work. But when we talk about the blood glucose, you can always check that out, especially if you have some of those. Sometimes they have the electronic one, whereby it's attached to your body and you can just use your phone to nice and check that. And also, they have those that one that you prick your finger, You have to nice and check your blood glucose. And the reason why you are checking those is to make sure what? You're keeping it lower, and you nice and keep everything in mind. Like, oh, okay. Especially when we talk about blood glucose, you got to make sure, especially nutrition, play a lot of role in those areas. So those are the biological components of aging. But now when we get to the physiological components, this is when we talk about what is going on physically. When we talk about muscle mass, when we talk about bone strength, when we talk about balance, because those works together. Because here's one thing, as an individual ages, they lose several things. Number one, they lose their balance. That's why it's very, very difficult for that. That's why it's very, very easy, for an individual to nice and fall. Because of what? Balance. And when they fall, what happens? They break something. They break bone. And that can be due to what? Bone strength. And that's what we call osteoporosis. And the main thing is difference between men and women. When a lady is getting older, getting to that menopause stage, their chances of osteoporosis increases. Their chances of weight gain increases. Their chances of all those comorbidity, diabetic, cardiac issue increases. But what are you doing in order to strengthen those bones? What are you doing in order to increase your muscle mass? What are you doing in order to increase your balance? And what are you doing in order for you to age well? So you can see your great-great-grandkid, so you can play with your great-great-grandkid, rather than just being restricted to wheelchair. So what are you doing? That's the big question for today. So now when we talk about all these three factors I just mentioned, the chronological factor, the biological factor, and the physiological factor, there are several sub-factors that can enhance all those three components. We have the genetic factor, we have the environmental factor, and we have the lifestyle. When we talk about genetic, most people don't know nutrition play a role in genetic factor. Whenever you go to the hospital, you are always given several questionnaires in order to nice and fill out your family history when it comes to either high blood pressure, low blood pressure, stroke, diabetic. That's to fill it out. But one of the main things I notice is most often we are asphyxiated with those information, but we forget to understand several factors that could affect those family history to continue. Because for example, if my great-grandfather have a specific eating lifestyle that brings a specific illness into his life, and it passes away at a younger age, maybe one of the factors is alcohol consumption, smoking, all those nutrition, bad nutrition, which we're going to talk about that. And that's what my great-grandfather was eating. So now when I'm growing up, that's the only thing I know to eat. So now I'm eating that same specific item. I'm focusing on that same alcohol. I'm focusing on that same smoking. Won't that family history of illness continue in that generation? Until there is a generation that stand up and like, okay, based on education, I'm going to change this. I'm going to stop smoking. I'm going to stop drinking. Even though that change might not affect that generation, but next generation to come is going to be more, they're going to benefit from that action that you make today. That's why it's very, very important, especially when we talk about the genetic factor. So now when we talk about environmental factor, where you live can contribute to your health. For example, every semester I have some video I ask my students to watch. Whereby I have this specific community whereby they live closer to a chemical plant. And for several years, that community is ravaged with specific type of cancer because they are exposed to that industrial waste in that area. And if you live in a community that doesn't allow physical activity, guess what? It's always going to affect you. And the third one is lifestyle. The way you care for your body, what you eat, what you drink. If you do medical checkup, all those are very, very important in order to facilitate what? Healthy aging. And out of these three factors, because I put this in a pie chart, guess what? The specific component that contribute the most to healthy aging is what? Lifestyle. Lifestyle contributes about 53%. Genetic is about 25%. And environmental is about 22%. So now that's when we're going to dive a little bit much more deeper into the lifestyle. Because that's very, very important. Especially when we talk about the bone strength, muscle mass. Very, very important. Because here's one thing. When an individual is hospitalized, if they already have a low muscle mass, just being hospitalized without just being bed rested, you don't do anything, those muscles is going to go quick. And do you know, muscle does increase survival rate? Do you know that? And an individual who exercise, who have larger muscle, whenever they are hospitalized, they have higher muscle survival rate than an individual who didn't exercise because of just the benefit that the muscle is really doing in their body. That's why it's very, very important. Because one of the main reasons a lot of people don't exercise, sometimes basically due to knowledge. Because a lot of people are like, oh, I'm not lifting a whole house, I'm not lifting, like why do I need to exercise? Because those are a lot of questions that a lot of people ask. They're like, why do I need to exercise? If I go to work, isn't work enough? And that's why when we talk about two different types of activity, we have physical activity and we have exercise. Physical activity is just what you do in your day-to-day life. Laundry, vacuuming, going to work back and forth. Those are not structural. You can do that for 8 hours. You can do that for 12 hours. You can do that for several hours. I won't say 24 hours because we need sleep. But when we talk about exercise, exercise is much more structural. It's much more individualized, just like medication. So, and the main thing is, there is a dosage for each individual. You can't exercise for 8 hours. You cannot exercise straight without no rest for 1 hour. Unless you are an Olympian. That's a little bit of marathon runner. But then they are running after a specific period of their run become physical activity. Because that's what they're used to. And the purpose of exercise is to enhance your physical activity so as to make sure your work is easier. So whenever you are walking through that stair, you're not huffing and puffing at the top of that stair. That is the main purpose of exercise. So you can be able to do your day-to-day movement very, very easily. So now when we talk about checkup, why is medical checkup important? So when I think about medical checkup, I think about assessment. Because I'm also a strength and conditioning coach. So I work with a lot of my athletes. And the reason why we do an assessment for those athletes in the beginning is try to see where they are and where we need to get to. Try to see what area they struggled on. Is it balance? Is it their endurance? Is it their lower body strength? Is it their upper body strength? Then we develop a specific approach in order to address that issue. It's the same thing with medical checkup. And a lot of people are not taking medical checkup seriously. Because they are like, oh, I feel good. Why do I need medical checkup? But then when there is illness, it might be too late by then. But assuming we take that time tonight and do that medical checkup, we would have uncovered a specific illness and able to tackle that illness right away. For example, just like stroke. If I do medical checkup and I see I have high blood pressure, then I'm able to manage it by monitoring my blood pressure, making sure I'm taking my medication, making sure I'm exercising, making sure I'm eating well. I'm able to nice and check my cholesterol levels, especially without those blood work. So they can nice and see where's my HDL, where's my LDL, where's my triglyceride. I'm going to talk more about that. And we are able to see that. Then the doctor is nice and able to see, okay, you are nice and closer to that borderline. Now you need to be on statin. You have to nice and address those cholesterol. Then with those medical checkup, you're able to nice and follow a guide. Then you what? You're able to nice and manage it. But in all the way around, if you don't manage it, blood pressure is high. Everything is clogged up with the cholesterol. Then everything is blocked. Heart failure, now that individual has stroke. Most situations, those stroke cannot be reversed. How many of you know that? In most situations, most stroke cannot be reversed. But what are you doing before you get to that stage of stroke? That's why it's very, very important to take those medical checkups very, very seriously. That's why I tell people, whenever you do your medical checkup, try to use that as a guide. Tell yourself, okay, next time when I do that same medical checkup, I want to see a better number. But what are you doing in order for you to see a better number? For example, if your number is on that pre-diabetic stage, what are you doing in order to make sure that number don't fall into that diabetic stage? If your cholesterol is a little bit too high, and your doctor is telling you like, oh, maybe you have 50%, you have 50% blocking in this specific area. What are you doing in order not to increase the speed of that blockage so as to lead to those cardiac issues? That's why it's very, very important. Medical checkup, very, very important to facilitate healthy aging. Because if we want to be around for a long period of time, we have to take care of our body. And that's why education is very, very important. That's why as part of one of the main things I do whenever I see patients virtually, we focus on exercise and we focus on education. Because the main thing is education is what creates consciousness. That's the main thing. I can exercise all day long, but if I'm not educated on the right food to eat, then it's not going to be beneficial. And one thing I want you to take away today: exercise does not cancel bad eating. Let me repeat myself. Exercise does not cancel bad eating. Because you are like, oh, I can have 5 beer, I can eat whatever I want, oh, I'm going to exercise later. Because we see a lot of those. People are like, oh, I exercise a lot, I can eat whatever I want. But that's not the case. Everything needs to be combined in order for it to be what? Holistic wellness. And that's where the education comes into play.